Welcome to episode 205. And tonight we welcome back Rich Douek. I got it right.
Ron,
I don't have the memory of a goldfish. Good night, everybody.
it's been a
It
pleasure.
was, yeah. But Rich is back here, and we're going to talk about because Dark Horse series Drive Like Hell that just finished up, and then he has another one coming out. And my computer went down with all my. It's the unicorn one, Lance
Heart Piercer.
Piercer.
Heart
Okay.
Piercer. Yeah.
So before we get into talking about those, tell us a little bit about yourself, about your history with comics. You know.
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Rich Douek. I'm a writer. Been writing. I kind of feel like my whole life, I started really young, even though I didn't really know kind of what I was doing. But I got into writing comics about 10 years ago with a series called Gutter Magic that I did with, first I self-published it, then I did it with IDW. And moving on from there, did a book called Wailing Blade with my friend Joe Mulvey over at Comics Tribe. We later went on to do Happy Hill together. But I think things really started taking off for me when I started working with my friend Alex Cormack, who's an amazing artist as well. We worked on Road of Bones together, and then we did Sea of Sorrows and Breath of Shadows for a little kind of horror trilogy over at IDW. And we keep working on stuff together. We did Drive Like Hell together over at Dark Horse. We've got a couple of other things in the works that will hopefully see the light of day soon. And so that's where I'm at. I've done work for, I think, pretty much every company, major publisher out there. Like I said, I've done independent books with IDW, with Dark Horse, Mad Cave, Vault. I have like a short story and like an image book, and I've done shorts for DC and Marvel too.
What you're
Nice.
saying is you've traveled the road around a little bit.
Yeah. Play in the fields,
Well, that's pretty good for what, 10 years? You said.
yeah, about that long, maybe like a little bit longer if you're counting like working up to getting my first stuff published.
Now, do you remember maybe the first comic book that you got or that read, or the one that made you kind of want to read more and get more into
Sure.
the addiction hobby, whatever you want to call
Yeah. I mean, I remember the first one I remember buying, like with my own money and stuff, like because I'm sure I, gotten a couple before, like like from relatives or whatever. But the first one I remember buying with my own money was GI Joe, A Real American Hero #4. So kind of dating myself here, but yeah, back then, I mean, I bought it at the candy store near my house, and I bought it because GI Joe was like the shit, and it was like all my like third grade brain could like think about. So and you know, like back then, like I mean, I was so young. It's not like I would like be regularly going to comic stores and stuff, but it was just sort of like, you'd walk into the store and whatever they had, they had. And, as much as I would have liked to get issue #1, they had issue #4. And it must have made an impression on me because I remember the whole thing. It was about it was called Tanks for the Memories, and it was about GI Joe was participating in like a Veterans Day type parade, where they like they were like driving their tanks like down the parade, and Cobra attacked, and GI Joe had to fight them off. But the thing was since it was for a parade, the tanks didn't have any ammunition, like they weren't like loaded, so they basically kind of had to psychologically like scare Cobra off. tanks that couldn't actually shoot. Yeah, so I mean, I guess you could say that made an impression on me. Did it make me want to write comics? I don't know. I was pretty young, but I know that there were a lot of like comics that I read that made like a lot of impact on me. There was a lot of old like Incredible Hulk and Ghost Rider. I think the series that kind of turned me into someone who, like the ones that where I started buying regularly, was X-Men around like
Mm-hmm.
original like Inferno era. Um, and like that was like the I think the first multi-part story that I remember, where I was like, oh, like I got to get the next one and see what happens, because I think like back then there were a lot more like one shots, and there was a lot more like, well, if you miss an issue here or there, you're not really like missing. You could still kind of like understand what's going on, and it wasn't like, I think today like things are a lot more tightly knit in terms of like, if you miss a couple, you're really going to fall behind. But like Inferno is like the first like event that I remember being like, oh, I gotta read this whole thing and like actually like go out and track them down and stuff.
Matt, anything before we move on?
No, I was musing about my own history with GI Joe comics being kind of early in my own reading journey. So hell yeah, dude.
Yeah.
I think number 80 was, in fact, I know number 80 was my first one where I got bitten by the comics bug. So little later in the run than you, but still
Yeah.
same impact.
Another GI Joe parade.
What's that?
I said another GI Joe parade.
This was an interesting one. So, and I don't want to take up like all your time with my bullshit, Rich, but this particular issue, it was a one and done, and it had to introduce like about 4 or 5 new Joe characters from that year's series, right?
Mhm.
And it had to do it in a way that felt like there were stakes and they weren't just disposable, and it was interesting. So yeah, the whole premise has to do with this little island rising up in the middle of the sea somewhere and Cobra claiming it, and this small group of Joes going in to kick them off there and saying, nope, not for you. So yeah, good stuff. I still love that issue and kind of always point to it as how to write a good one and done comic that works on multiple levels.
All right, so let's move on to Drive Like Hell. Rich, why don't you kind of give us the overall summary of the story, and we'll go from there.
Sure. So Drive Like Hell is about a car thief and wheelman, for like kind of a crew that does heists, and he steals cars to use on the heist so they can, then just like ditch them and get rid of them. But he kind of falls in love with this car that he just has to steal for his next job. It's actually a 1980 Turbo Trans Am, and he's just like, it's like love at first sight. He's like, I got to drive this thing, so he steals it for the job. And the owner catches up to them in the middle of it, and the little twist is that the owner is a very high-ranking demon in hell, and there's something really important in the trunk that he's willing to mobilize a lot of demons to get back. So it just sort of turns into this gigantic supernatural car chase with angels, demons, possessed police officers, preachers. It's just like Alex and I just tried to up the mayhem in like every consecutive issue, and just it's like really inspired by like we both really love like old like kind of classic car movies, like stuff like Smokey and the Bandit and Cannonball Run, all the way up through like more serious ones like like Bullet, and even like modern day stuff like Fast and the Furious, all is kind of like finding its way in there. But yeah, just like it's like my friend Chris Conn said it's like an AC/DC album, like like in comic form. And yeah, I kind of agree with that. You know, like Highway to Hell would be a really good theme song for it. Maybe the obvious one, but yeah, it's just a really fun series. You know, and I think it's a little more like lighthearted than some of the stuff people are used to from me and Alex, because our IDW books were quite dark and quite serious. But this one is we were just having a lot of fun. Maybe it's like a little palate cleanser for us.
Kind of to follow that up, having worked with Alex before, was there anything that with this one that kind of maybe came easier, or to working together with him and to mix the art and the story?
Yeah, I mean, you know, this is like Alex and I's fourth or fifth project together, and everyone, you know, I think we just, it's like now, not that we didn't like kind of trust each other before, but now we're like very much in sync. Like, you know, I trust that no matter what I'm going to ask him to draw, like he's going to draw it, he's going to draw it well, knock it out of the park. So I'm able to kind of, when I'm writing, I'm able to really push the visuals. I saw a comment from Joe. We're all friends though, but anyway, I'm able to kind of like push the visuals a lot more, because it never enters into my head of like, you know, is this going to be like too challenging for Alex to draw, or is this something that is not gonna look right? So I just really trust him to render whatever kind of comes out of my head script wise well. And I think conversely, like he's gotten really good at like knowing what I like to see. And so it's just sort of like this relationship where we're just constantly like making each other better, because we're like very, very much in sync when we do stuff together.
And how did you guys meet? Oh, sorry. How did
Oh,
you guys get paired up for for your first book? And
oh yeah, sure. So yeah, there's an independent publisher called Comics Tribe, and they are, I don't know if your listeners are very familiar with it, because they're not in comic shops so much anymore. They do Comics Tribe is like a really Kickstarter focused publisher. Um, they do a lot of really successful campaigns. I've done a few with them. There's one, Alex is involved in one right now for Sync, which is a horror book he does with our friend John Lees. It's an amazing book. And that's actually how we met, was because I was doing Comic Tribe stuff. Did Wailing Blade with Joe Mulvey. And at the time, Alex was just starting out Sync with John. And I had the idea for Road of Bones. And I was just sort of looking for an artist. And then when I started reading Sync and saw what Alex was doing there, that was like, oh, okay, well, I think Alex would be great for this. Next time I see him at a convention, I got to talk to him. And we would see each other fairly often, because since we were both doing books with Comics Tribe at New York Comic Con every year, we would just hang out at the Comics Tribe booth. So, yeah, that year, I think it was maybe 2014 or 2015, we were just hanging out at the booth, and I was just like, hey, I have this idea, you know, I really like what you're doing. And he's like, all right, what's the idea? And, you know, so like I pitched it to him, and he loved it. And I think like a couple of weeks later, I had like given him like a few pages to start on, and just like a kind of an outline of like who the characters were. And he just started sketching, and we just kind of went from there.
nice.
Yeah.
And 4 series later.
Yeah.
So I got a little bit of a process question for you because you mentioned that you and Alex trust each other pretty implicitly now. Um, when it comes to Drive Like Hell, the thing that really caught my eye artistically on it was the portrayal of the motion and velocity of the vehicles as they're traveling, especially the Hell car, for lack of
Mhm.
a better term, as they're, shooting down the highway. And these are things that are a little tricky to convey in a static medium
Oh
like
yeah.
this, right?
Mhm.
So, I mean, first of all, hats off to Alex for pulling it off, right? But I'm curious, just looking at it, like how much of that was self-directed by you, and or were you very collaborating, like in the moment as you wrote the script with Alex, saying, "Okay, this is what I'm visualizing this 2-page spread to look like."
No, it's all me. No, I'm kidding. No,
Well,
uh,
Mr. Humble.
no, I'm joking. Basically, yeah, like we talked about it a lot beforehand, because it's like you said, like it's like a static medium, so um, it's really hard to kind of convey like the dynamics of like like an exciting chase or something. I think it's a little bit easier if you're talking about like superheroes or like an action scene kind of chase where people are running, because it's like you know when someone's running, like their body is in like different positions and stuff like that. Like a car, it's always just a freaking car. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So we talked a lot about um what we liked in like certain movies where we saw car chases. Like we talked about the chase in Bullet a lot. We we talked about that. We talked about books where comic books where we thought it was done really successfully. Like I know Alex took a lot of inspiration from Sin City. There's one, I forget which volume, but there's one that like features like a pretty lengthy like car chase that I think he took a lot of inspiration from. And it comes down to um, I think really just sort of a couple of things. Like on my end, it's varying where the action is. So it's like, it's like we'll see the car and then we'll be inside the car, the people talking, and then we'll be out, then we'll who's chasing them, and then we're back to the car, and just sort of like calling those shots as far as like, you know, moving in and moving out and like where the attention is and the pacing of like how we're going from like scene to scene. But mostly it's all in Alex's court, and there's a few, I don't want to call them tricks, but like there's like a few techniques he used, like motion lines is one. As far as like backgrounds go, that helps. Um, uh, Another thing that he realized was that from Sin City was like there's never a shot where like the wheels are touching the ground. So it's like when you kind of show the wheels in the air, it's like when you think of like a car chase and like they're doing those like kind of like little hops and jumps and stuff like that, and it just gives everything like a more airier feel. Where like if you see a picture of a car with its wheels on the ground, like it could be standing still, it could be in motion. You don't really know. When it's up, it's like adds to the sense that it's like definitely in motion. And then another thing that a key component is our third collaborator, which was Hassan Osmani Aha, who's our letterer, who did an amazing job not only with the lettering but with the sound effects. The sound effects that he puts in were very kinetic, and when we have something like cars smashing into each other and like a smash or like the screeching of tires and things like that, you know I want to say like I think like it would have been very easy for a letterer to just sort of pick a generic kind of like comic book sound effects font or whatever and just like lay it in, and that would have been probably fine, and nobody would have like been like, oh, these sound effects are terrible. They just would have been like, just sort of like basic, I think he really kind of elevated the look of the book, and also really, really helped that feeling of like speed and action and engines roaring and things like that, with just the way that he lettered it really contributed
Sure.
to that.
No, no. I mean, I know letterers don't get the credit they deserve. How what was how did you guys communicate with him for what you guys were thinking, and then let him, you know, also have his what he thought made it, would make it work.
Yeah, I mean, like, funnily enough, we didn't really have to give him that much direction. Uh, you know, I think we just sort of we told him the premise of the book, and um, shot him over a few pages of the artwork, and it was just sort of like, well, this is like when we were pitching. I think we had about 10 or 12 pages or something like that, and we were just sort of, okay, like, let's see what we get back, and then we'll give notes, and like we'll figure it out. But like, he really just kind of like knocked it out of the park, like immediately. Like we got it back, and we were just like, whoa, this looks fucking amazing, So I think that just like speaks to his talent and his experience, and he's just like very intuitive and very good at like um doing lettering that really kind of complements a book. I worked with him one other time before on Happy Hill with Joe Mulvey, who's another artist I work with a lot and trust implicitly. And the stuff that he did for Happy Hill is very different than the stuff he did for Drive Like Hell, but also it fits the book like a T. So
I have to briefly interject. Joe Mulvey actually did post a comment asking if Alex was as awful to work with as everybody says.
Yeah.
And I did not make the connection on the name and just thought somebody was being an asshole and deleted the comment. So,
Well, Joe
out there listening,
was being an asshole, but that's okay.
Alex doesn't sound like a very bad guy.
No. He's not. It's because we're all friends, and we all
Right.
hang out. Like anytime we're together, we all hang out, like at a con or whatever. And it's just sort of like a joking kind of rivalry because they both love working with me so much. I guess they want to be
Alex
they want to be the favorite. Well, I mean, Alex is a really nice guy, but all that gore and darkness and horrific imagery has to come from somewhere. So I don't know.
It does, and that was one
Might
thing
be
about
hiding
Alex's
something.
art that we hadn't commented on yet was the color.
Yeah.
Like those demons just look gnarly and gross, and
Yeah.
really just the coloring of this thing leaps off the page in such an awesome way.
Yeah. I mean, Alex and I, like Alex is great at coloring his own work because he kind of, I had a couple of artists that don't really like doing it because they like kind of feel like it's going over the same page like over and over again, and they they can't really get into it, or they're just not really they're not really like into doing colors. Not every artist is, but Alex, I think he just, since he's coloring it as well, even like his inks and his pencils are kind of like, he knows how to kind of like set himself up for like what he's going to do in the color stage, and to be able to like do that well. So yeah, he's great. I think, I'm trying to remember when we were doing Road to Bones, whether it was like, I think it might have just been like sort of like a convenience kind of thing where it was like, hey, do you want to just like, rather than going out and finding a colorist, and do you want to just take a shot at coloring this yourself? And he's like, yeah, like absolutely. And then it just sort of became like, I guess, like his signature style for these books, at least. Like he does work with colorists on other projects, but like for us together, he's usually coloring himself.
So when you were working on Drive Like Hell, was there one character that you kind of got attached to, or kind of had in the story, but as you wrote them a little more, you kind of wanted them to be more developed?
Yeah, I really liked this guy Hiram, who's like the leader of this the motorcycle gang called the Choir Boys. And like we did have to pack a lot into 4 issues, so I really kind of wish I had gotten a chance to like give him a little more to do. He does have some really cool moments, but I think I liked the character when I came up with him, but when Alex turned in like the design, that's when I was like, oh man, I love this guy, because he has like the big Misfits like devil lock hairdo, and I was just like, that guy looks fucking awesome. So he was a lot of fun to write. Bobby Ray, the main character, was a lot of fun to write. Yeah, I think like all the characters, like it was just really kind of freeing, because to like have like kind of this like comedic element with it, because it was just sort of like a license to like just have fun with them. Like Roscoe the preacher, he's like this like
I love
televangelist preacher, and it was just sort of like he's totally just like a character of like a televangelist, like every bad thing you've ever thought about, like Jimmy Baker and like all Jim Baker and all those guys. It's like, yes, he is that stereotype, but like it just works for the style of story. And yeah, he was a lot of fun to write as well. So
Well,
yeah,
those clowns exist. Like
yeah,
I live in Oklahoma. I've witnessed some of that
yeah,
chicanery.
yeah.
They're not just caricatures on that they're playing on the TV. They're caricatures in real life too. So I was wondering. It almost feels like there was enough little subplots that this could have gone 5 or maybe even 6 issues. I
Yeah.
was curious if there were any ideas that maybe you had to curtail in order to make it fit to 4.
Yeah, I mean, we originally pitched it as a 5 issue series, and it would have been nice to have the extra space. I think we could have fleshed out a few things a bit more. Like there's that one character that comes in the last issues, kind of like a motorcycle cop, and or like a rival demon. And there was a subplot where like he was a little bit more important in terms of like it was less that he was just like a rival and more like he was like the head of like a rival faction of like demon cops, and there was going to be a little interplay between the two, between him and Rourke, who's like the main bad guy. um the trucker at the end of issue 2 had a little bit more to do, wound up having to cut a lot of his stuff. And it's hard, it sucks to like have to kind of get rid of that stuff like for length, but I think what it really does is let you think about like what's really important to the story. Like the way it kind of did it is just kind of looking through all the scenes we had planned and all the threads. It's just sort of like for each one, it's like really has to justify its existence, like whether and you sort of wind up with 2 categories. You need like need to have and nice to have, and it's like you need to have this, otherwise the story doesn't make sense. Or and then the nice to haves are the ones that sort of explore these like subplots, or like give things a little more color. And as much as it sucks to have to cut that, it's like those are the ones you have to take out, rather than the stuff that is like really necessary. But you know, like you never know. Like if we wind up, you know, we could always, maybe we'll do a sequel, maybe we'll do more, maybe it'll show up completely in a completely unrelated project. You know, because
Yeah, I was gonna say because the way it kind of ends,
yeah,
like there's more that can be told, and
Very
there's,
open road ish.
wow, nice tying together.
I'm here for you, buddy. I'm here for us all. But I actually, I mean, Chad, you said it. This thing, without getting into spoiler territories, clearly leaves itself open for a sequel. In my mind.
yeah.
So,
Well, I mean, I'm not gonna like.
more adventures percolating for Bobby Ray and Dahlia.
Yeah, I mean, it's all up here. You know, obviously, Dark Horse is going to have to be on board, and we will kind of probably revisit that once the trade is out and we see how the trade does. Because you know, I know that that's really important to them, but I know that Brett, our editor at Dark Horse, Brett Israel, like loved the book and was really helpful in you know, getting it published and throughout the whole process. So I mean, I'd love to do more for it. It's all like, as with a lot of things in comics publishing, it all kind of comes down to like whether it's like financially like feasible to do so. So you know, that's something that we'll know in time.
I have a question. I don't know if you can answer it. If you can't, like maybe blink twice or something. You and Alex, you did your three books with IDW. Did you pitch it to them? And just it,
Actually, we didn't,
okay,
and it's not because we had any kind of problem with them or anything. It's just that we were kind of developing Drive Like Hell and Breath of Shadows around the same time,
okay,
and we knew we wanted to do Breath of Shadows with IDW because Breath of Shadows is like thematically linked to Road of Bones and Sea of Sorrows. They kind of form like a horror trilogy.
hmm
So we knew Breath of Shadows was going to be with IDW, and we wanted Drive Like Hell to come out like very soon after. And I don't think there was really enough time to like develop both of them
hmm
at the same company. So that's when we just started like walking it around to a few other places. And, you know, we're like really happy to have it at Dark Horse because they're a great company.
I was just curious. I mean,
Yeah,
um,
no. It's not, there's no like, I know like inside baseball, but like IDW has gone through like a lot in the past couple of years as far as like laying people off and refocusing and restructuring and stuff like that. But it really had nothing to do with why Drive Like Hell is not an IDW book, because all that happened before there was any inkling of any kind of like trouble. So
okay.
yeah.
So, kind of looking at the larger picture of your works, what is it about the horror genre that appeals to you, and who are kind of your inspirations? When you this is
Well,
he's laughing.
I'm laughing because like I kind of stumbled ass backwards into horror. I did not ever intend or plan on becoming a horror writer. Like if you had asked me 5 years ago, well, no, that's not true at this point. If you had asked me 10 years ago, like what kind of a writer are you? I would have said, oh, I'm like a science fiction fantasy writer. And you know, I also like superheroes and stuff, but like horror was never a genre I thought I would write. But that being said, it's not because
Seems
I
to be
didn't like
working
it.
for you.
It's not because I didn't like it, and it's because I just didn't. It just didn't occur to me. Like those were not the type of stories that were like kind of popping into my head. So what happened was I was thinking about a story where I was like, oh, like I'd really like to do like a prison break story,
Mm-hmm.
and I was thinking like, oh, maybe it'll be like a sci-fi prison break, or maybe it'll be like a fantasy prison break or something like that. So I was just like, let me do some research about like prison breaks and, things like that. And I started, among my readings I was reading about the Russian Gulag and how people used to escape from that, which was one of the most, horrible places on earth, in one of the most horrible places on earth. And that's when I read about the Road of Bones, which is like an actual place like on this earth where, they basically, the reason it's called the Road of Bones is because it's a highway through Siberia, and the ground would get so frozen that when people died, which happened very often because they were literally being worked to death, the ground was so hard, they couldn't really spare any workers to dig graves for them. So they just threw them in the ditch for the road and paved them over. It's a horrific thing that actually did happen. In our story, we do mix in like a little bit of like supernatural stuff and things like that. But it was just reading it, just something about it resonated with me where I was like, this is a crazy fucking thing that happened. And I can't believe that I never heard of it before. Like, like I studied history, in school and everything like that. And, just totally like new information for me. Like, and I was just like, maybe I don't need to put it on some other planet or in some, realm with like elves and orcs or whatever. Maybe this is a compelling enough story in the real world to just, tell it and tell it as a horror story. And I was like, and I don't know if I'm any good at writing horror, but I'm going to give it a shot. Turns out I'm good at writing horror. And it's funny because like I look at Rotobones and like and then I look at the book we did right after, Sea of Sorrows, and I kind of feel like everything I learned about writing horror while doing Rotobones, sort of like stumbling around and discovering like as I went, then I put into practice writing Sea of Sorrows, and then all the stuff I learned at Sea of Sorrows I put into practice when I wrote Breath of Shadows. So that's like a long-winded way of saying like like the horror thing, it's not like, I don't want to call it like a fluke because it's something I do like and something I do want to continue doing, but it was just sort of like this weird thing that like came into my life. That being said, some of my favorite horror stuff that I draw inspiration from is like, I'd say a lot of it's like from film. So stuff like John Carpenter is very big for me. Like his horror stuff, like The Thing, Prince of Darkness, very like hugely influential for me. A little bit of like sort of like cosmic horror stuff like HP Lovecraft. Like I really used to be into a lot of that, but I think like the thing with that I try to kind of put the brakes on a little bit is I think like, Cthulhu is like just sort of like everywhere. Like everybody like kind of like does like Lovecraft and stuff like that. And I don't really want to like lean on it as like something that, or at least not lean on it like too explicitly. Like, like I don't want to like, there is some like great stuff out there that based on H.P. Lovecraft's and like Cthulhu mythos, but I kind of feel like I want to do my own thing. So while I like it and respect it a lot, I try to like kind of curb that influence on it on myself as far as writing goes.
Now, since a lot of your stuff has been horror based, and but you have dipped your toe into the superhero universe.
Mm-hmm.
You did a couple Infinity comics for Marvel. I think you did some Batman. Is that
Superman.
something that Superman? Okay.
Yeah. No, it's all
is
good.
is that is that something that you'd like to possibly further explore if the opportunities present?
Yeah, I'd love to. I love doing it. Number one, it's a lot of fun, and really cool to be working with characters that I'm like so familiar with and have loved for like such a long time. Um, I remember I really do kind of buy into the uh, Grant Morrison super gods thing, where that like superheroes are like the modern mythology, and they're very much like fulfilling the same function that like ancient myth, like myths and legend telling, um like the function that performed in like those ancient societies. I think superheroes perform a similar function in our society, um whether we realize it or not, or at least it does for nerds. I don't know if it does for like people who are obsessed with sports and stuff like that. But uh, it is a way to kind of like tell larger than life stories and work with themes that, in a very dramatic way, that just really kind of like appeal to me. So yeah, like I'd love to do more. It's not always in my hands as far as like
Yeah.
whether I will get to do more or not, but every time I've done it, I've had a great time doing it. So
And when you were doing, I think you did the Kingpin, and did you also do the Kang
yeah, did
Infinity
Bang.
King?
Yeah.
How, was it anything challenging to write it for the vertical scrolling as opposed to panel?
Not, I'd say it was actually really interesting because I think it was the sort of thing where like I was like the first one that I did, Kingpin. I actually wrote Kingpin first, even though it wound up coming out later. Um, and there was that kind of like moment where it's like, well, how the hell do I write this? Like, I don't have like page turns, I don't have panels. But when you kind of realize what you do have,
I'll put some horror in it.
uh,
I
yeah.
said I'll put some horror in it.
Well, but when you realize the tools that you do have, it opens up a lot of interesting possibilities. So, like for like the Kingpin one, it's called "Who is the Kingpin?" and the whole goal of the thing was that, uh, let's say you're new to Marvel Comics, or you watched a show, or you're just like new to it, and you're like, you want to kind of get a sense for who the Kingpin is as a character without having to dive into like 50 years of back issues or whatever. So it's like you're supposed to just sort of be able to read this comic, and at least
The
like
Cliff Notes.
it's not going to be as in depth as reading the actual stories, but you're going to just get a feel for it. And so I kind of have it being narrated, and it's talking about the Kingpin. And what I wanted to start with was that the Kingpin basically like controls New York City, right? So thinking about, we've got a vertical scroll. So where you start, you open the comic, you see the New York City skyline, okay? And as you're scrolling, it's just kind of coming down in the buildings, and then you're at street level, and you see a bunch of people in the background. Threw a couple of Easter eggs in there. Like if you look real close, you'll see the Thing in his like like sometimes the Thing wears like an overcoat and hat,
Well,
stuff like that. Like when you're coming down in the sky, you see Spider-Man swinging overhead, so it's like it's just the scene of the city, right? And you're coming down, and you're coming down, and you're coming down, and then you just sort of like, as you're reading, then you see the top of Kingpin's head, and then just his massive body just fills the entire window. So the reason I did it that is because it was like I'm talking about the Kingpin looming large over all of New York City, and that's like a visual way to show it. And that's something that you can do when you're scrolling in an infinite scroll comic, but you can't really do that on in a print comic. You can do something similar, but you're not really going to get the same exact effect. And then there's other things you can do are like when you transition panels, you can do things like there's like a scene in the Kingpin one where he's gripping a picture of his wife Vanessa so tightly that the picture frame breaks and shards of glass fall down, and we pick up the shards of glass, and then that sort of becomes our transition to the next panel. It's like you see these shards of glass falling through black space, and then the next panel comes up. So it's just like it's just really cool when it clicked. It was just amazing because it was like wow, like, you know, I can't pull from my regular bag of tricks, but I have this whole other new bag of tricks that I can play with and explore and stuff like that. So that was like a lot of fun, and I'm actually like a big fan of the format. Like, you know, like I love seeing my stuff in print. I love having a bookshelf full of it, but like it is really cool to work on those like projects, like where you get to like do different things. So I think it's something that you know, I'd love to continue doing with Marvel, but also like every now and then I'll get an idea and like maybe like Webtoon would be a place for this, or some, you know, or maybe just like on a website or something, because it is like a pretty cool format. Yeah.
Do you have any more digital content coming up with Marvel, or I guess DC for that matter?
No, nothing right now. I actually have some print stuff coming up. I have a story out. I think it's going to be out next month in Edge of Spider-Verse 2.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, I got a short story in there for a Cyborg Spider-Man, which was a design by like that Eric Larson did in like the 90s. And it's
yeah.
It's just a really cool, like, you know, like it's like Spider-Man with like he's got like a cybernetic arm and like a cybernetic eye and stuff.
Yeah.
And like in the original story, it I think like he had cybernetics for like 2 issues. Then it was like, oh no, I'm healed. Like, you know, so you know, back to normal. This one it's almost like, okay, well, what if he kept them? What if he kept the cybernetics in this variant universe? You know, because it's all Spider-Verse is just all about like different spider realities.
Super fun.
Yeah, so it's a lot of fun, and I had a great time writing it again. And yeah, I might have some other stuff in the pipeline. Nothing specifically like digital, but like I said, you know, I'm always, if any Marvel editors are listening to this podcast, I'm always, or DC editors, or anyone really.
Yeah.
I'm definitely down to do more.
Now you said that you're more of a fantasy guy, and you have a new fantasy series coming out in May, I believe. You
Yeah.
want to talk that up a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, like it's called Heart Piercer, and it is. I kind of said it's almost like a return to my roots as far as like a comics writer goes. Heart Piercer, it's just I'd call it like a dark fantasy. Like it's got a lot of like kind of like a Elden Ring, Dark Souls kind of like in its DNA. Also, major inspiration was, I don't know if anyone's familiar, but there's an old manga anime series called Vampire Hunter D that inspired this a lot. Basically, it's about this woman named Atala who's like a huntress, and her entire like she was a huntress of like magical beasts, and the whole time she was doing it, she thought she was protecting humanity from like these magical beasts, and it was basically had like a lord who was like sending her out on these missions, like you have to go kill this one, you have to go kill that one. And she finally kills the last one, which is a unicorn, and she brings back its horn as like a, you know, proof and tribute. And then she learns that she's betrayed, and this lord that's been sending her out to kill all these magical beasts has been sending her out to kill the ones that are basically protecting humanity from the darker things like vampires and werewolves, and all the way up to like dragons and giants and things like that. So basically she gets taken out of commission, and the world just gets overrun by these like dark creatures. And she wakes up years later into this like new world, realizing that she's like a major cause of like why things are so messed up, and she has to decide whether she's going to, you know, make it right. Go, you know, part of it is she wants revenge, but also she just feels this like intense guilt over the world being what it is. So right now we're scoped for 4 issues, another 4-issue miniseries, and it's going to tell a complete arc where she basically finds a village that's under siege by a group of werewolves, and she's going to, you know, see whether she can save that village and turn things around. And then again, it's something that like we did, Gavin and I did a lot of world building with this one, so it's the sort of thing where like we could tell a lot of stories in it. I think it's one that we definitely have like a clear like plan for like volumes 2, 3, you know, however long we could go. Hopefully we'll get there. So you know, that's why it's really, you know, important for people to talk to their comic store, tell them that, you know, even if, you know, pre-order it if you can. If you can't, just tell them you're interested in it. You know, if you're out there listening, it sounds like it could be up your alley. Check out, you can check out my Twitter, check out my Blue Sky, check out my newsletter at rdouek.com if you want to see some artwork. We're going to be putting out previews of the story soon. Just really want to try to get people like hyped for this, because we really like, it's one of those things like it could be like big. Like I could see this going for like, you know, 6 volumes, 10 volumes. I don't know. Like I can tell stories in this world for as long as I'm able to. So, you know, we really love people to get on board.
And this was with Dark Horse again?
Yeah. So Dark Horse again. It's actually funny because like we have a different editor on it, because when we were pitching it, like Alex and I were pitching Drive Like Hell to Brett, but Gavin, the artist on Heartpiercer, Gavin Smith, is new, a different editor at Dark Horse named Connor, and he was pitching it at the same time to Connor, so they kind of both got approved like at the same time. And then Dark Horse was like, okay, well, we got to decide which one we're going to do first, and you know, like space them out a little bit. So that's kind of how that happened. But you know, Connor's amazing too. So
Very cool.
Yeah.
From what I can tell, Drive Like Hell was, you know, well received in the fan base. Um, I don't know if you were surprised or not. You know, it's what, you know, were you expecting the response that it did get?
Yeah. I mean, I was not concerned, curious more. I was curious whether like my fans or like the people that are fans of mine and Alex's work would like it, because it is really different from the stuff we'd done before. But I felt like we kept enough of, even though it's like a different tone and different type of story, I think we kind of kept the essence of like what works well when we work together. So I was really happy that people did like it, and really happy with all the positive stuff I heard about it. All I heard, like, I'm not, I don't think like it was like, universally loved or anything. Like, I'm sure there were some people that didn't like it, but almost all of what I heard was like positive and made me feel really good, because it is a book that, like, weirdly enough, even though it's like not like a serious book, it does mean a lot to me, because it's like, I think it's the first book I wrote, or maybe not the first, but I'd say like it's my most confident book. Like, it was like I was like, this is what I love. This is the book I want to write, and I'm going to put it out there. And I don't care if people don't like it. I don't care if, I like, like they always say, like, make the comics you want to read. It was like, this is the comic I want to read. There was no should I do this? Should I do that? Everything in that book is like all like, yes. Like, it's like, should I do this? Yes. Is this too crazy? Like, yes, do it anyway. You know what I mean? So I really did like put a lot of myself into this book, and into Drive Like Hell, and put a lot of like, had a great time writing it, because like writing with that kind of like confidence and that kind of like feeling behind it is a great feeling, because, you don't feel like you're second guessing yourself. You don't feel like you're, catering to somebody for the sake, catering to an audience for the sake of catering to them,
Right.
or like saying like, oh, well, it might be more successful if I do this or if I do that. Like, none of that. This is just me on a page. You know what I mean? So, it was like important to me that it was well received, and it was. So that did feel great.
Well, we're almost to our hour time, and I do know I was told not to talk about it, that you do have well, we will have the announcement of your next book on Tuesday at 11 o'clock for
Oh,
Mad Cave.
yeah. Okay.
So,
Yeah.
so
Awesome.
maybe once
Not
that comes out,
now.
huh?
We've
I
not.
know. I said no. I didn't. I wasn't going to give anything
No,
away.
nothing at all.
I was just saying that people have to come to the website at 11 o'clock on Tuesday to find out what it is.
I love it.
Yeah. It's that's another great book, and as that one gets closer to release, I'd love to come on and talk about that one as well, like when we can.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, that one was, again, like me trying something new that I think worked out really well. So yeah.
Well,
Very cool.
you want to take us out, Matt?
I will. Yeah, I can. Rich, thank you so much for hanging out with us tonight and talking about Drive Like Hell. It's a cool comic, and you and Alex should be, and Haas should be proud of it. And I hope personally, I hope we see more from that little weird corner of your world. But if not, then it was a hell of a ride anyway. So we will be back next week. Chad, who do we have next week?
No, and next week we're off.
Oh, next week we're off? Okay, well, you made a liar out of me. Way to go.
Yeah.
Rich, thank you very, very much for hanging out.
Anytime I can.
And
thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you guys for listening. Thank you for checking out the Comic Watch site at comic-watch.com. And just as ever, the world can be a crappy place, but it does not have to be. Get out there, read something cool, support your local comic shop, and above all else, be kind to each other. Thank you very much. We are the Comic Watchers, and this is our show.